students of course A101 Introduction to Management, the group of Dr. Iman Karam. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about one of the basic 4 managerial functions, namely planning. Please be informed that we are going to combine 2 chapters together in these slides, chapter 8 and chapter 9 from the book. So please only take the basic headlines from the slides and study them from the book. What you don't find in the slides, don't study it from the book. Thank you. What is planning? Planning, as we have taken in chapter 1, is defining the organization's goals, establishing strategies for achieving these goals, and developing plans to integrate and coordinate work activities. So there are basically 3 components of the definition of planning. Number 1, determine your goals, your organizational goals. And number 2, establish strategies that would allow your organization to achieve these goals. And number 3, put plans, or you may call them action plans, to coordinate, integrate work activities so that you would be able to achieve the strategies and then the goals of the organization. We need to know that we are basically interested in formal planning in the organization. So formal planning usually involves setting specific goals that cover a specific time period. So, for example, we need to increase our production by 3% in the coming year. So you would specify your goals, which is to increase production by a specific amount or specific percentage in a specific time period. So in 1 year, 2 years, and so on. Don't specify broad goals without giving time frames. The second aspect of formal planning is that these plans should be written and shared with organizational members. They're not a secret. They are the formal plans of the organization, so they should be revealed to everyone in the organization. And the best way to make everyone know about these plans is to have them written and shared with organizational members. Why do we need planning? Why is planning so important? Or why do managers plan? There are 4 reasons for planning. Number 1 is to provide direction for the organization. So remember when Henry Fayol talked about unity of direction, that we should only follow one plan so that everybody would know what they have to do, the basic they would know the basic goals of the organization, etc. So when you have a plan inside your organization, this would provide direction to all organizational members. Number 2, it would reduce uncertainty. For example, when these plans are shared among all the members, then everybody would know exactly what the organization is aspiring to achieve, and they would know accordingly what their tasks are, and this would eliminate any uncertainty. You wouldn't find anyone asking, what should I do, or why am I working in this way? They all know the plans of the organization, they all know the goals of the organization, so everything is certain for them, everything is known for them, and thereby we are reducing uncertainty. Another reason why planning is important is that it minimizes waste and redundancies. When you have a plan, you know exactly what to do, with which resources or with how many resources, etc. So this would reduce waste of resources because you know exactly what you need and how you are going to work. So it would minimize waste, and it would also avoid redundancies, that people would keep repeating things in an unnecessary way. Okay? Fourth reason why planning is important is to set standards for controlling. Remember when we talked in chapter 1 that controlling is about monitoring performance and then measuring it against certain standards and then evaluating or determining whether the observed performance is uh, at the right level and so on. Well, when we compare the observed performance against standards, we are actually comparing performance against our plans. Are we really doing um, well towards achieving our goals? Are we following the standards of performance that are set based on our plans and goals? Or are we lagging behind? So, actually, when you have a concrete plan for the organization, you can then determine your standards of performance and then compare the real performance of the employees against these standards to determine whether your employees are on the right track towards achieving the organizational goals or not. Now, this is an exhibit that explains the entire planning process. So we actually go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps when we plan in the organization. Number one, we identify the organization's missions, goals, and strategies. And then we conduct a SWOT analysis, analyzing thereby our internal and external environment. Then we formulate strategies that would help us achieve our goals and missions, and then we implement these strategies. However, we will never be satisfied by this step. No, the most important thing is to evaluate the results from implementing the strategies that we have formulated in order to make sure that what we have implemented would really achieve the plans of the organization and its mission. Or otherwise, we need to repeat the entire process from the very beginning and take corrective actions. Now we move on to study each and every step of these 5 steps in more detail. With regard to step number 1, which is identifying the organization's current mission, goals, and strategies, it is important to know that a mission is a statement of the purpose of an organization. So it tells you the reason why the organization exists, its basic goals, and what it is trying to achieve. But a mission is broader than a goal because it is a broad statement telling you the reason why this organization exists. And it also tells you the scope of its products and services. For example, FEPS has its mission on the walls. Okay? So you would find that the basic mission of FEPS is to um, help the students graduate and compete locally and internationally in the different fields of economics, political science, statistics, public administrations, and social science computing, as an example. So it tells you the scope of its products, which is to provide educational services to its students to help them compete locally and internationally in the different fields. So this is the scope also of the service in the different fields of economics, political science, statistics, etc. Whereas goals, on the other hand, are the foundation for further planning. They are more precise than the mission. So we would say, for example, that we need to make sure that we would increase production by 3% in the coming year. So it allows you to plan how to achieve this increase in production and in the coming year, so over the specific time period. And as we said, that goals, since they are precise, they need to be measurable performance targets. So when we say increase production by 3%, so everyone is supposed to exert more effort than the previous effort by 3% at least. So you can measure it in the end. With regard to step number 2, which is conducting a SWOT analysis, here we need to know that SWOT is an acronym standing for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So S for strength, sorry, um, uh, W for weakness, O for opportunity, and T for threats. When we analyze our external environment, we consider the opportunities and threat in this external environment. So in case we had, for example, positive external factors such as a strong economy, a democratic and stable political system, a clear and established legal system, a clean environment with plenty of raw materials and resources and so on, then all these are considered opportunities. Whereas if we had negative aspects in our external environment, such as, for example, wars or shortage in natural resources or weak economic systems and recession or something like this, then these are considered threats in our external environment. So when you do an external analysis, you are actually scanning your external environment and identifying opportunities and threats in this external environment. But when you do an internal analysis where you would scan and analyze your internal environment that is related to your organization, here you are focusing on the strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, if you had skilled workers or employees, or plenty of financial resources, or the most recent equipments and technologies, then these are all considered strengths for your organization. So strengths create value for the customer and strengthens the competitive position of the company, firm, or organization. So when you have resources, capabilities, and skilled people, and so on, then you are actually having a competitive advantage against other organizations. So this is considered one um, point of strength for your organization. But if you had the opposite, for example, unskilled labor, or shortages in your financial resources, or obsolete technology and managerial styles, and so on, then these are all considered weaknesses in your organization or in your internal environment. So this would actually place your organization at a competitive disadvantage. Again, when we do internal analysis and external analysis, where we would focus on strengths and weaknesses in our internal environment and opportunities and threats in our external environment, we are thereby conducting a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis can be defined as an analysis of the organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when we generally do the SWOT analysis, then we focus on two basic things, the resources and the capabilities. So the resources are an organization's assets or positive things or properties and so on that are used to develop, manufacture, and deliver a product to its customers. Again, we talked about money as a resource. We talked about labor as a resource. We talked about information as a resource. All these are assets that the organization would own and would help it to develop, manufacture, and deliver a product or a service to its customers. The capabilities, on the other hand, are an organization's skills and abilities in doing the work activities needed in its business. So it's how people work and what they know and how they can use their knowledge in their work activities and so on. Of course, if the organization has plenty of resources and capabilities, then it has a competitive advantage. But if it falls short on resources and capabilities, then it has a competitive disadvantage against other competitive organizations. When we talk about strength, we are talking about any activities that the organization does well or any unique resources that it has. Okay, so positive capabilities and positive resources are considered strength, whereas weaknesses are activities the organization does not execute well or needed resources it does not possess. So if we had shortage in our resources and capabilities, then this means that we have weaknesses in our organization. Also, I need to know what core competences are. Now, competences are the organization's major value creating capabilities that determine its competitive weapons. So, they are value creating capabilities. They are the things that the organization possesses and they create value for this organization. They make it so famous, so successful, so efficient in the way it works. Okay, these are the core competences. For example, when we talk about um, um, Magdi Yaoub Hospital, then we know that it has skilled doctors, physicians, okay? So these are considered as part of its core competences because they create value for this hospital. They are well known and they are very skilled. They do very successful operations with high levels of success. So these are considered as core competences that create value for this hospital and are considered as its competitive weapon to compete against other hospitals, for example, or against other organizations. Okay. So now, after we have conducted a SWOT analysis, analyzing our external and internal environment, as well as we have already in the first step identified our mission and goals, now it's time to formulate strategies that would enable the organization to achieve its goals and mission. And here, this is the step where decision making takes place. Remember when we said that decision making affects all the managerial functions in the organization? For example, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. So this is here the slide that demonstrates how decision making affects planning. So when you formulate or when management formulates strategies for achieving the organizational goals, it actually develops and evaluates strategic alternatives. So remember when we said that the first step in decision making was to identify goals or problems, and then number two, to set certain criteria against which we're going to evaluate the different alternatives that we would generate, okay? And then in order to help us evaluate these alternatives and then choose the best alternative that would achieve these goals, remember? So here we are going also to develop and evaluate strategic alternatives that would allow the organization to achieve its goals, okay? And then select the appropriate strategies for all levels in the organization. Remember when we were talking about the different departments, so first line management, then the middle management and top management. Here we also are talking about selecting appropriate strategies for all levels in the organization that will provide relative advantage over competitors. And it's important that your strategies would match organizational strength to environmental opportunities. So it would seek to exploit and benefit from the internal strength and advantages that it has, as well as from the external opportunities that it also has. Okay? And it's also important that it would correct weaknesses and guard against threats so that it would try to overcome the internal weaknesses that it has inside the organization and also shield or protect itself from the external threats in its external environment. So now we move on to the next step, which is implementing strategies. After we have formulated the strategy and selected the most appropriate one to achieve our organizational goals, now it's time to implement or execute the strategy. And it's very important to realize that sometimes organizations might put the best plan and formulate the best strategies to achieve the organizational goals. But when it comes to planning, if they face problems, the entire planning process um, collapses or is actually destroyed. Why? Because they didn't pay attention to how these plans and how these strategies were implemented. So it is very important that organizations take good care and monitor carefully how those plans and strategies are implemented. Okay? For example, you might put the best plan, best strategy, but you have unskilled labor who are not able to work effectively and perform the things that are required in order to implement the strategies and the plans for the organization. So even though you had the best plans and strategies, but you were not able to implement them. So actually the entire planning process is negatively influenced by problems in the implementation. So again, organizations have to be very cautious when it comes to implementing strategies. Also, they have to realize that it is very important to fit the organizational structure and activities to the environment of the organization or its context, okay, to the different contingencies that the organization is facing. And when we're talking about organizational structure, which is the subject of the coming chapters, actually, here we're talking about putting the right person in the right place at the right time with the right resources and so on. So you need to make sure that everyone inside the organization is in the right place, doing the right work with the right resources at the right time so that they can implement the strategies. And also, it is very important that this structure is compatible to the context in which the organization exists or compatible to the environment. So put the right people with the right skills in the needed place, okay, and so on. Also, we need to make sure that sometimes we should take the appropriate strategies that are compatible to the organizational environment because it is the environment that dictates the chosen strategy. So, again, depending upon the strengths and weaknesses that you have in your organization or the opportunities and threats that you are facing in the external environment, according to all these circumstances, you should formulate a proper strategy to allow you to work and achieve your goals in the best possible way given the context in which you exist. Okay? And again, effective strategy implementation requires an organizational structure matched to its requirements, matched to the needed um, resources, capabilities, and so on. Okay, so again, implementation is a very crucial um, step in the organization. Um, eh, Organizations have to be very cautious when it comes to implementation and have to make sure that the structure inside the organization is compatible to its environment, that they are putting the right person in the right place at the right time with the right resources, and that they are meeting all the requirements that the environment is imposing on the organization. And again, I said that never be satisfied when everything is implemented in the right way. You need, in the last step, to evaluate the results. So you need to decide how effective the strategies have been. Did they really achieve the organizational goals? Or they achieved other goals that were not so important for the organization, or they were not planned for the organization. For example, say we have decided to build a bridge in order to reduce traffic jam in a certain region, okay? Now you have implemented the project, etc. But then, and everything went well, went fine, and implementation was perfect, and so on. So now you need really to check whether the bridge eliminated traffic jam in the street, in the region, or it didn't help at all. Or maybe it just caused more accidents, or maybe it caused more traffic jam, or something like this. So you need here to check whether the strategies that have been implemented did really achieve the goal, like reducing traffic jam or congestion in the streets, okay, or not, because maybe the chosen strategy that was implemented was not the correct one. So, in that case, if it wasn't the correct one, then you need to take further adjustments and start the entire planning process from the very beginning. So, again, formulate new strategies and select the most proper one that would achieve your organizational goals. And then in the evaluation process, also you need to determine what type of adjustments are required. Do we need, for example, to make the bridge more bigger? Or do we need to change its place, maybe? Or do we need to think about another way of reducing traffic jam, like, for example, having a metro in that place, maybe something like this. So you need here to take the adjustments, if any, and if they were necessary. Okay, and by this, now we have finished the entire planning process. We've talked about identifying goals and mission. We've talked about doing a SWOT analysis to analyze your internal environment and check the strengths and weaknesses that you have in your internal environment. And also check or scan the opportunities and threats that the organization might have in its external environment. After that, you would formulate strategies that would enable the organization to achieve its goals. And these strategies should be determined for each and every level of management inside the organization. And then you need to implement the strategies and be very cautious when it comes to implementation. Make sure that the right person is in the right place. So match your organizational structure to the environment, and make sure that everyone is doing what he or she is supposed to do, and monitor performance, as well as in the end you need to evaluate the results. Did the strategy that was implemented really achieved the organizational goals and plans, or it didn't. And in case it didn't, then you need to think about the needed adjustments. Sometimes you don't have to change the entire plans or the entire strategies, but you have to make only minor adjustments. But on the other hand, sometimes you might find out that you might need to make major adjustments to the strategies or even change them out completely. So in that case, you would go through the entire planning process from the very beginning. Maybe you don't have to identify your goals in case they were the correct goals and they were clearly identified. And or if you've done the SWOT analysis, then maybe you don't need it. But at least you would have to repeat the step of formulating strategies and select another strategy to implement the organizational goals. But if you did something wrong at identifying your organizational goals and plans, or you did something wrong when analyzing your internal or external environment, then of course in that case you need to repeat these steps again. But if identifying goals and doing the SWOT analysis went okay, then maybe when you need to do major adjustments, then you need to start from the step of formulating strategy, and you would have to develop and evaluate different strategies and select the most appropriate one that would achieve the organizational goals. By this, we have finished our first part or first lecture on planning, and you will find another file on the second part of planning. Again, please only refer to the topics that we have discussed in the slides and study them from the book. What is not mentioned in the slides, don't study them from the book, because we have combined two chapters together, chapters 8 and 9. So, and we don't ask you to study the complete chapters. So please choose only what has been covered in the slides and study it from the book.